how that can happen.
But, all the time.
Yeah.
I remember back when I first started the channel, I was like, my heart would be racing before I'd hit live. And it's so funny because I was all over the internet before and making little selfie videos on Instagram all the time. I mean, I got over that, but it was
but this is your baby. This is you want it to work and be successful. It's a bit more pressure, isn't there?
Yeah, it's definitely it grew way too fast. I wasn't prepared for sure, but
right. You present well. You're fair. You allow people to talk of all sorts of ilks and backgrounds, and you keep your mind open, and you're respectful. Oh, mind you, you've got a great sense of humor. You teaser.
Some people don't like the sense of humor, but
dear.
It's the rough edges that Michelangelo is not smoothed down yet. I'm getting smoothed over.
Well, you see, we're all neurodivergent. We know that we grate each other.
Yeah.
And yet we get each other as well. So, we aren't as offensive to each other as other people could find us.
Right. Yeah. Well, everybody, welcome back to the show. Some of y'all already know what's happening. Got a special guest today, Miss Allie Rowan. Everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Some of y'all know who she is. Some of y'all don't. But because some of y'all don't, we're going to just do this fresh. Let's wipe my memory. Everybody forget everything you know. Allie Rowan, how you doing this morning?
A little bit nervous. It's afternoon for me in the UK, of course. But I'm looking forward to this opportunity just to speak and be led by you into what you'd like to know.
Yeah, well, one of our friends, she always says, everybody's voice matters. And I think there's a lot of voices I want to bring on the channel. Now, you've had a few interviews. So, hey.
Hi there, Tiger Shark.
Hey, guys. What's up, everybody?
Hey, what's going on, man? So I didn't know if you were going to be up and at 'em or not, or if you were doing stuff with the fam today.
Yeah, we got 2 birthday parties, so we got to, get ready for all that. But
yeah, whenever you need to peace out, you can. No biggie. You can just just chime in and peace out.
I'm going to adjust everyone's microphone a bit here.
Sure.
So this is a pre-recording?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
I misspeak so much when I'm like, amped up and stuff. So I was like, I need to be able to chop out something if I really butcher it. I don't have that diplomat training like my friends I used to work for had. So anyway, here we go. Let me change the view a little bit. It always does me. All right, guys. So what we want to do is we want to let Allie come on and talk a little bit about her life. There's things that she has in common with us that you're going to find out. But without further ado, I just wanted to say, Allie, tell us a little bit about where you're from, just to start, like where you were born, if that's not too much information, and what the childhood was like, and was there maybe a religion involved? Go ahead, take it away.
Okay. Well, I was born within a stone's throw of Hampton Court Palace. Not inside it, of course. Parents, just ordinary middle-class people living within a rather noisy stone's throw of Heathrow Airport. Moved over into the High Wycombe area in 1973, and I've stayed in South Bucks since then. So I'm located between London and Oxford. Met my husband while I was doing university. Actually, no, before that, I'll go back a bit. My parents weren't Christian, didn't go to church, just nice, moral, middle-class people, decent, reasonably stable background. But I was always a bit of an odd bod. I didn't know I was autistic ADHD, found it really hard, lonely life, didn't understand why I couldn't get on with people or people didn't want to connect, and, had all that sort of trauma that you get when you just feel that you don't belong to everybody else. So, but somebody came alongside at school and started talking to me about Christianity. I was sort of interested, shelved it, went heavy the other way into atheism, got to high school, started the Atheist Society with a couple of other friends. Used to go and spy on the Christian Union, wanting to, just get fodder to laugh at, really. One time there was a guy who came along, gave his testimony, drug addiction, stuck in jail, had a vision, he says, of Jesus, some big transformation. But then he became a quite well-known gospel singer. And he had his guitar with him and he had his backing track. And just a presence was about him. And I thought, oh, I want to know more about this guy. He was talking in a sort of mission in town, I think that night actually, or the night after. And that's when suddenly just talking about the love of God. It wasn't about sin and repentance. It was just the love of God that I knew I needed to connect with. So that was the beginning of my Christian life in 1974, end of 74. So I was 14 years old. Very next meeting they had, this was in the height of the charismatic renewal. There was a lot of antagonism between the established churches and the ones that wanted to break out of tradition and go with the fresh thing. So anyway, I'd started going to the town's Baptist church. It was still very traditional, very Calvinist, sort of ordinary, not very exciting. We had a big youth group, which everybody went from school. But the next meeting at the mission, I had an experience with the Holy Spirit, told the youth pastor the next day at the church, he said, oh, we've got to be careful about this satanic stuff, blah, 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 and absolutely crushed it. It didn't take too much longer, and I came across another young guy who had that same presence about him, so I sort of joined up with him. I met him on at the Greenbelt Christian Rock Festival and hung out with him, and then started going to his house church, and that was just amazing at the time. In somebody's large extended living room, again, lots of presence. It's very hard to describe, and I think people know they've had a sort of spiritual thing. It's some sort of it's nothing that you've manufactured. It's just something that seems real, and you could sense something. So I've always stayed in the charismatic side of Christianity. I've never gone into the dry theology, heavy traditional church type of thing. But it also meant that the groups that I was moving in could easily become abusive in that you get a dominant leader. Long story short, I've ended up with my husband helping somebody set up their own church, their own sort of charismatic fellowship, thinking, they're going to continue in the freshness. The church that we'd started with back in the 70s had sort of become more formalized. It got itself a building, it got big, it got cumbersome. The ability to freely contribute and be more spontaneous had sort of started disappearing. And this this other pastor seemed to promise to maintain what we felt then had been something really genuine and fresh and of God. So we threw in our lot and helped him. This started in 86. Now, I had 2 children by then, my son, followed by my first daughter, 3 more daughters to come. So we had, it's, we're a great family, very different, all mature, sensible adults. Got 1 grandchild as well now.
Oh,
congratulations.
Yeah, grandma. He must be 14 months old now.
Oh, that's the fun time.
Yeah, he's so cute. But anyway, without us knowing it, this chap that had, he had a very clever and yet what seemed authentic care for people and a sort of a pastoring gift. And he actually helped my husband quite a bit. He'd had sort of some, nasty things happen with him. And, we were both young, both insecure in various things. And this pastor really helped establish him, believed in him, gave him responsibility, grew him, he was good to him. But in the end, as this fellowship carried on and on and on, it started getting more and more coercive, and took 25 years eventually. And my hubby Chris felt, no, come on, something needs saying. And that's when we hadn't realized all this time he'd loved bomb us and made us into his own little empire to rule and get his validation from. And he became Mr. Hyde. He'd been Dr. Jekyll up until that time, but no, we had the Mr. Hyde treatment. It was not pleasant for 9 months, hanging on, hoping he'd have an opening to talk and try and resolve things, but he was just surreptitiously slandering us as these sort of criticizers in the midst who were going to topple the leadership, who are, don't associate with people that say, they're being bullied, or loads and loads of stuff from the front that were very much designed as daggers at us and a means to cohere his faithful around him against these unknown people. Of course, I should think our demeanor changed in the meeting, and it was probably fairly obvious. Just he couldn't be happy in front of all of that. So eventually we had to exit, and you can't leave a cult in any good stead. So people that I've known for over 38 years, this one particular lady, we used to go on holiday together as a fellowship, and this single lady often was in our home. She was like an auntie to us. Every Sunday just about she came home and ate with us. She hadn't heard a single word of criticism from us about this pastor. We'd just been supportive to her. She seemed absolutely okay with us, but even this lady had been turned. Absolutely everybody that had been friends for over 25 years, this fellowship had been on for 25 years, they were all, let's say, manipulated, I suppose is the word, to reject us. So, as such, we had to lose all our friends. But in a very peculiar way, that was a time that gave to me a grounding and a security in knowing who I was and being happy with who I was, and that it didn't matter what other people thought of me. And getting that grounding inside of myself, it was a very maturing experience, and I'm really glad for it. And it's also put into me and Chris just a passion to expose spiritual abuse and narcissistic tactics that are used by people. So we're very keyed up to it, very alert to it. But the whole experience, certainly for Chris, immediately just his whole faith thing just shattered. I hung on to mine for a while. But we had also connected with a lady who gave us sort of an inroad into LinkedIn with a discussion there. And it was the abuse really from that you get in the American churches more than England, where you have the gender, the patriarchy. So you've got your Southern Baptists and the abuse of women and all of that stuff, and supposedly justified by scripture. Now, this is the 2014 when I started on this. And this is really my first excursion into exegesis, and actually looking hard and looking at the history and looking at the culture and what fed into the interpretations. And, as such, I gave myself a crash course in discerning and knowing how to do a good translation that was faithful to the original author's intention. And I was quite successful in these conversations with patriarchals who, came up with the standard few verses, and you could show that this was culturally relevant and it wasn't relevant now, or it had been misinterpreted and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, it was also, all my studies were also leading me away from a lot of the standard Christian dogmas, and they just weren't holding water. We'd started going back, in fact, the local parish church where we'd been married, and it was a good, healthy church anyway. But it became irrelevant. I didn't need God like that anymore. We didn't need that prop. Chris soon realized, he couldn't be authentic there. And in the end, I did as well. And then COVID came, so it was an excuse to break off anyway. But in between times, I'd got introduced to Myth Vision, Gnostic Informant, History Valley, all these great shows here. And it absolutely boosted my understanding of the fallacy that the Bible was God-inspired, and that you can rely on it to give you any truth about spiritual things. So whatever I had experienced of presence, I just call it presence, because I don't know what else to call it. I don't call it the God of the Bible. I don't call it the God of Buddhism. I don't call it, it's bigger than that. So, I don't hold to any Christian beliefs. It's all really Christian belief is belief in the dogma that says the Bible is inspired and that what's in there is true. But that's a church dogma.
Right.
But when you actually look at the text, you realize how they've been constructed, how they've been edited, how they've been changed. Virtually no author that's named in there actually wrote it, and
right.
the whole thing is a house of cards. There's some beautiful wisdom in there, some lovely stories, some rich poetry. That there's plenty that you could really admire and like about it as a piece of literature.
Exactly.
But as far as being, the guide for my life or truth, no, it isn't any longer. So I'm firmly not a Christian, probably not a theist. I'm not superstitious. Currently, I don't have any desire to have spiritual experiences, so I'm not seeking to have any worship of anything. I'm just happy as I am. So, as such, I'm a-religious at the moment. May change. I've looked into, and I'm not really seeking any answers. I don't really need to find out, is consciousness the thing? Is, near-death experiences, that there's lots of fascinating stuff. So anyway, I've always had an interest in old, ancient cultures and history, and trying to get back to roots. And I've been very impressed with James Table, who it's not just looking at the Bible, it's the culture around it, the Jewish writings, the Dead Sea Scrolls, archaeology. He's really good with the archaeology. He's been involved with quite a few significant digs. And a lot of his discoveries and thinking around the texts that surround Jesus and the Jesus movement have really quite impressed me. So that's one influence on where I am now in my seeking to understand really who the real Jesus was. All right. He certainly wasn't God. And at the moment, I won't go into that, because I think you wanted to ask me questions about this later. But I'm also been connected with the Discord called Patristica, and great guys. Jack Bull runs the Discord, and he edited the it's a reconstruction of Marcion's gospel. Now, if anybody hadn't heard what this is, in the sort of 140s or so, 138, 140, a guy called Marcion, who'd been a member of the church, but then had slightly different ideas, because there was nothing solid by that time. Nobody had defined the doctrines. Nobody had even decided what Jesus was, or it was all so fluid. There was no church hierarchy. There was no control of the individual churches around the empire. There was no central doctrine. It was all very, very fluid, and various schools. And really, the Gospels were still in writing. They were still in process. They hadn't been closed by that time. Now, Marcion was the first to gather. He had 10 letters of Paul and a very sort of primitive Luke's Gospel. But the 10 letters of Paul were really quite short. They seemed like either a lot had been cut out, or they were the first, and after they'd been published in the 3840, a lot of other stuff had been added. All right, and that's the question, which way round? Now, Marcion was claiming the church added, and the church is saying Marcion subtracted. So this has been a great detective work done by the patristica team. Now, Professor Marcus Vincent has done his own intensive study on it. He's been aided by Dr. Mark Bilby, who does, he's very good at the AI, to assist stylistic analysis of these letters of Paul. And it's absolutely clear that what Marcion had is in one handwriting, and inserted is a different person's idea. Now, all of those inserts tend to be Paul's wonderful big arguments. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So you've got all this and all the theology and the things that, there are certain books that people know aren't written by Paul, like the Pastorals, and several of the other letters that got canonized but never written by the people they were claimed anyway. I think most people know that. But even within Paul, get this, Paul has nothing at all about the sacrifice for sin. That is an introduced theology from the mid to later second century. How about that? His was only Christ as the Passover lamb that then delivered you from death. And all of his emphasis was really to get back to Eden, the first Adam. And Jesus came as the second Adam to take us back there. And Paul, I don't think, nor did any of the gospel writers, not put this way, the first disciples, who were then under James, Jesus' brother, were still very Jewish, sorry. Carried on temple worship, just wanted to have a different aspect of the temple worship because they were against the animal sacrifices. And actually you find that in Jesus, you find it in the Qumran community. And John the Baptist was saying, look, you don't need an animal sacrifice. Come here and get baptized for the forgiveness of your sins. They could see that the Old Testament had additions. Even they could see that. And that all this temple sacrifice stuff was a later addition. Okay. Post Babylon, probably, when they came back to try and establish themselves again. Right. And you get the impression from all sorts of corroborating evidence that Jesus was mainly crucified for that incident in the temple where he was driving out the animals and the money changers. Right. And he's saying, and of all things, the word that is translated, the Greek word that got into the Bibles that we have now, that Greek word, lestis, it says, you've made this house it's supposed to be a house of prayer, but you've made it into a den of thieves, kleptes, and not robbers in the Hebrew. He's quoting a Hebrew verse. And the word there means a violent shredder, like an animal tearing the prey. All right. And in the Hebrew, when that was changed into the LXX, this idea of violence is included in lestes, which is why it became lestes. Then the gospel writers read they were Greeks, so they read the LXX, they didn't read the Hebrew, and then lestes got put into the Gospels. Again, it's this anti-sacrifice thing. And you can look at tales of also his brother James later when he was set upon and he was assassinated as instigated by the priests, because again, he was saying, he was told to sit down and explain his way. And in that way, it wasn't including the temple sacrifices, and that's what they were objecting to. And it makes you think that's what originally Paul was objecting to, this wayward sect of Christians, so-called, Christ followers, who were against the temple sacrifices. And that's what the offense was. Not that they were claiming he was Messiah, all right, but that he was against the temple sacrifices. So anyway, I don't really want to talk about this a lot, but I'm just saying there's a taster. There is so much yet to learn. And I'm thoroughly enraptured by all the discoveries and finding out. Well, yeah.
I can't stop trying to figure out more.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Your story sounds so much like the beginning of my life as well. I'm atheist. But there was something about going to youth nights that was attractive to me. I don't know if it was to make friends, but undiagnosed ADD, but probably ADHD. And the way you described wanting to be part of people, or I can't remember your exact words, but everything about that is so identical to myself.
Yeah. That
when you said you started going to church, I was like, I did too, because I was so curious to know more. However, you mentioned the word lestes, which Greek word. You've done like Greek courses, like you've done Greek schooling and stuff.
You say that, but honestly, a lot of it's just self-taught.
Okay.
I'm not a Greek expert, but I'm a good analyst, and I will be a lot more careful and check up through the lexica, check up through how it's used. So it's a bit of a fallacy to think that I'm an expert in Greek. I'm absolutely not.
Right.
But nevertheless, I know what to look out for dishonesty in translation. All right. This is from where I was learning how to translate and exegete so that you can get more faithfully to what the original author intended his communication to be, rather than reading into it your own ideas or trying to make it fit into our modern framework or whatever. So you've got to go into his shoes, into his history, what's he saying to his audience with his language in their time and in their problems, and ask all those questions and get through all those like layers of context until you can say, okay, these words are likely more to mean this than they are to mean that.
Yeah, it's like reading out rather than in.
Yeah.
Or maybe the other way around. Yeah.
No, you read. You let the text speak. You read out from the text.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been a huge topic lately. It's been huge. I mean, every channel that I've found along the way has been digging into this, and along the way, I've sort of, I don't know how to say this. How do you start this journey, right? And I don't even want to take up a lot of time because everybody here knows the story. But I wanted to do something and write a book about an alternate universe where an earlier, like, my mom's an anthropologist, blah, blah, blah. I've said it 100 times. And I wanted to have just like a fun book where there was like an alternate reality where there was no divinity applied. So what would like an anthropological explanation be? And then like make that into a story. And I had this story about a Roman soldier who runs across Jesus. He joins the ranks and he has his own experience watching everything happen. So I wanted to learn more about like the scriptures and stuff, because I had never dug into that. I was having those very shallow atheist arguments with people still, like 7th grade arguments, like, how's anybody going to live in a fish? And how's how can you do this? And how, the stuff that if a YouTube channel is still there, I won't even want to really jump in yet, because some of the stuff that I ran across, I just never saw this coming. Some of the perspectives out there trying to learn Greek, they would be awesome stories, awesome movies, different take. You know how The Last Temptation of Christ was kind of a different take. Interesting. I liked that. But this, being the art kid in the School of the Arts, I had an appreciation for the arts. So I liked changing stuff up. I was really fascinated by, Tiger Shark's back. Really fascinated. And I ran across a show called Gnostic Informant after finding Myth Vision. Found out, I watched Myth Vision enough. I found out cool things like his dad's special forces. He lived in Washington. And I couldn't really tell if he was Christian or formerly Christian. And then people have sort of told me what they thought. I haven't ever really talked to him. But I got really lucky and I got Gnostic Informant. The stars aligned. And then I met Stephen from Cross Bible as well. But there was another guy that I was going to ask you about, and you have a presentation for us. I found a Greek classicist that had a personality that is similar to mine when I'm in that frame of mind. When the demons got a hold of me and I'm storytelling in front of, either my wife or, my mom or my dad growing up or friends. And it was this show called Lady Babylon. But I found this guy, he was talking about some stuff I had never heard about. And here I am looking for sacred mushroom in the cross stuff. Ooh, this is a mushroom. I want to know more, and I'm finding every way for Jesus to just be a mushroom. The Holy Grail is just the upturned mushroom. Oh, there's mushrooms in the windows. And then I started hearing stuff like, Jesus used kids as drugs. And I'm like, what? And so it took me back a little bit. And so I dive head first into this classicist's stuff. I buy his books. I watch all the videos. And I'm like, you know what? I need to write a different book real quick. And it's going to be a book about the history leading up to Christianity and some of the alternate theories that exist. And I found out this series of different theories where apparently in philosophy schools and classics schools, they talk about theories that are very, very unorthodox, or at least not what we've interpreted the religion to feel like. And they talk about a lot of entheogen use and stuff. And they talk about a bunch of other things I probably don't even need to really open up, just because a lot of the people watching this already know what that channel is like and what they entail. And I'm not saying anything about any of that. But you had a presentation. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about how you got involved with Greek first, or if you wanted to kind of mix that in with the presentation, or what would have been the most way to flow that.
All right. Well, I'll talk a little bit and then go into the presentation.
Perfect.
Now, in some of my searching for how to answer the patriarchal questions, one of the chief words that gets misunderstood and misused is the one in 1 Timothy 2:12. I don't permit a woman to teach or to authentine. Now, what is that word? Now, it's been translated have authority over. And because of that, it's then become women can't have authority over men, therefore they must be submitted, and it's one of the key verses that is used to subjugate women. And even if you don't take this is Paul, this is inspired, this is God, this is what is true. Even if you don't take that, it was still fascinating to know what was actually being said. Okay, so I embarked on a research to really dig around the texts and find out what this was all about. And it took me into the Nag Hammadi library, the Gnostic things there.
Elaine Pagels, then all about her. Then.
Okay, and you see, another part of that verse is, I want a woman to be not silent, but to calm down. All right, and be in submission and learn. And then I don't permit her to teach, etc. Okay, so this thing and it comes twice. This calm down. I thought, okay, something else is going on there. And also there's another one in 1 Corinthians 11 where it's become this silly head covering passage, all right? But reading around the cultures at the time, when it says a woman should not have her head uncovered, it's actually referring to the hairstyle, because they would wind up their long hair and cover their head with their hair, and to have it uncovered means it was flowing loose. Now that's something the Maenads would do. They would be wild and shaking their heads around, and their hair would be down. And this, by this time, I was seeing so many what looked like pushbacks against libertine Gnostic things happening in Paul's letters. And I thought, well, if he was written in the 1st century, all the other evidence is saying that the Gnosticism didn't go until the 2nd century. And I had these chunks of sort of anti-Gnostic pushback, and you could see it in 1 Corinthians 2, you could see it in 1 Corinthians 11 a lot, which then goes into, you don't acknowledge the Lord's body, you get judged, you're having wild feasts, you're being greedy, and you're not waiting for people to come, and all this sort of self-centered wild feasting, and what could be manic shaking of heads, and what was this man sleeping with his mum, or what was that about? And lots of things are beginning to fall in place, I thought. And it talks about, very often it pairs up porneia, which is the wild illicit sex, with akatharsia, which is uncleanness. Why sex and uncleanness together? All right, that those two words come up a lot. I won't go into them all now, but there was this huge swathe of stuff, certainly in Jude and 2 Peter, loads against these libertines that sneak in unawares, who have turned the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ into an opportunity for licentiousness. What's all this about? And then when I started looking at the heresiology, pushing back at alternative Christian groups, and in Ignatius's letters, I thought, actually, this is all tying together. Why? If these are 1st century letters, why is it all the stuff that they describe in the 2nd century? And then I came across these Marcion studies. And guess what? Every single thing that I was seeing didn't fit were the 2nd century editions. And it was at a time, actually, when there was the apologists like Justin Martyr, Athenagoras, Archelaus. They were all pushing back, trying to defend the Christians against such accusations as incest, cannibalism. And the other one was atheism, because they didn't believe in the whole pantheon of gods. That's fair
Right.
enough. And a lot of other, even secular writing, were also corroborating this. So I was thinking, well, how is it that everybody's thinking it's only generally when you read Christian stuff that's written about the heretics, they say, oh, the heresiologists are their enemies, so they're just going to say all this rot about them and just slander them and say they're being wild, etc. It's just like a polemic. But actually, that's not borne out in the texts at all. It actually matches. But at the same time, a lot of the other things that are written seem to be very ascetic. So why the two? And then it all fell into place when I found a bit in Irenaeus's Against Heresies, book 1, chapters 6 and 7. And there he describes how they would divide people into 3 classes. You'd have the spiritual class, the soulish, the psychic class, and also the material class. Now, the spiritual were saved by nature, which meant they'd come from the divine spark. They were inherently spiritual, and they were just temporarily trapped in this physical body. And when to some extent, they had to feed their life, their spiritual life, while they were in the body. But it was also appropriate just to let the body have what it needs. But it's not going to pollute what you are in the spirit. And they likened it to gold. You can shove it into filth and the gold will come out untainted. You just have to wash it off. All right. So that was their excuse. But it was also a sacred act. They believed they were receiving grace, the afflatus of salvation, through, and although it was rather politely said, but basically it was through the semen communion. And it was a sacred act. Okay. And that you had to possess a woman without having fallen for lust. Now that's been interpreted as, you don't have sex, but no, it was to have intercourse up to the point of ejaculation, and then you have the control to come out, and then you use the semen. Okay, that was what it was.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
This is the best episode we've ever had now.
All right.
I was going to ask about this. I've been asking everyone about this, and
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
I misunderstood you before when we talked about this months ago. I thought you were saying something else, but
I was like, were they or were they not doing this?
I thought you were trying to say they weren't doing it at all.
You see, and because of all of that, when I heard Amen on Gnostic Informant, I thought, great, I want to get hold of this scholar. He's right on my street. Okay. So that's why I connected with Amen. All right. And also I'd picked up enough from other reading about them having what looked like entheogenic experiences. Right. So I thought, this is my drug man. Great. So
right.
I emailed him, outlined a little bit of my research, and this thing about eating things sacrificed to idols. It doesn't mean food necessarily. Okay. So anyway, having connected with Amen, it was immediately, Lady Rowan. It was great honors. We must get an interview with Carl Ruck, which we did. And to talk about the semen communion. Long story short, he'd had his times muddled up. He told me to come on at a certain time, and they were waiting, and I sort of came in just a quarter of an hour before it was about to finish, and so it didn't really happen. And Rob Street, do you remember Rob? He was in on that interview as well, because he was very much one of the early guys. Anyway, I connected well with Rob, and then I was invited to join. Actually, I carried on emailing my findings with Amen. We talked very much on a peer level, a lot of respect there, both sides. then I was invited to join Myth and Law just before the Lady Babylon shows were launched in 23. So there was a tab for Lady Babylon in the Myth and Law. And I connected with quite a few people there. And then I was invited to start the Greek lessons. I'd picked up enough sort of informally, and I thought, well, okay, let's have some structure. So I joined in. But at the same time, I was thinking, Ammon, you're being quite careless with your exegesis here. Right. You're stretching things, you're misquoting things. He was already saying, the passage itself says that the parents brought Jesus, their children, for him to touch.
Mark.
And the disciples then said to the parents, stop bringing the children. Don't bother the teacher. And then Jesus rebukes them and says, look, come here, bring the little children such of the kingdom of heaven. So, I've read the Bible for 40 years. I knew these passages, and I knew he was misquoting it when he said, the parents were saying to Jesus, stop touching my children. I thought, that's not what it says. And bit by bit, I was thinking, come on, you're stretching things here. You're not actually keeping integrity to what is actually said there. And then he went into Mary with her dildo and all of that. And I thought, that is not what the text says. It's not even what any of the Gospels say. Even, because in John's Gospel, it was that she broke the bar and poured out upon his head and poured out upon his feet. And, the word is pour out upon. It's not rubber dildo and shove it up. I thought, come on, you're pushing something here. And then he started on Laestis, and he did the initial introduction of Laestis as a child trafficker from a text by Lycrophon. Now, at the time, I hadn't done enough research to know what the Lycrophon text was actually about, but I could know enough to go on to Perseus Tufts and find the English translation and realize that he'd just selected a tiny little bit, and the bit above was talking about the context. And the little bit he did just didn't fit with what he was saying about the actual context was. And I thought, you aren't being honest here. But anyway, all the time I was in Myth and Law, Lady Babylon tab, I would occasionally just ask some questions, try and stimulate people to think and look at themselves and thanks for this, and actually think rather than just take what he was saying. And when he's also doing with Laestis, I noticed in the LSJ that it says later pirates. All right. So in other words, Laestis stopped meaning pirate later. Now, what did it mean by later? Okay. And it was replaced by pirates had already been there anyway, but it was Laestis completely disappeared as a connotation for pirate. And yet Ammon was still holding it in Koine Greek, that it was still, the Koine period, that it was still pirate and therefore trafficker, right? So that was one thing of irritation as such, that you're twisting, you're pushing, all right? But the one that actually I got into trouble for was Rob asked a question about John 16:11, which is now is the Prince of the World judged, or something like that. I can't remember how the exact phrase was. And he addressed it to me on the Lady Babylon tab, saying, Rakanali, how would you interpret this? So I said my blurb. And in part of it was, on passing, I said, cosmos can mean people, but here it's meaning the ordered system, the thing that the Prince of the World is controlling. It's, it's his domain, his organization, okay? So as such, I answered correctly. And then Ammon very, very rarely interacted on the tab. It's just usually, the people talking amongst themselves. And he came in not unkindly, but just basically saying, look, you don't know the beauty of the word, just hang in there, you'll find out. And it doesn't mean people. I thought, well, hang on a minute. So I went and looked through, it was Bible Hub I was using at the time. I didn't know about Cross Bible, but at the time it was Bible Hub. And I found 57 places where cosmos could be interpreted by people. God so loved the cosmos that he sent his only begotten son. That's the prime example. So I put that example back in and said, look, it can mean people. And this is in Koine Greek. In classical, it didn't mean people. But when the language has sort of evolved a bit into the Koine, it did have that connotation of people. All right. Now, I'd said that publicly. And I thought, come on, I want to raise this with Ammon. I'd already messaged him twice saying, can we please talk? There's some things, I'd just like to be able to get clarified, please. I wasn't trying to attack him or anything. I just really wanted to have a means of common ground between us. No response. I thought, well, I know he's close to Snappy. So I said to Snappy, just repeated some of my concerns that were on the public tab. And in amongst that was a mention that he wasn't paying attention all the time to how connotations shifted into Koine Greek. And then I went on to other things. So I had about one sentence about the Koine Greek. Apparently the next day, or that evening, I think it was, Rob was on Zoom with Ammon, and Snappy came in. And Snappy was saying that I had said to him that Ammon can't teach Koine Greek. It's not what I said, but that was Snappy's interpretation and misrepresentation of what I'd said. Next day was the Greek lesson. And it wasn't even a lesson, actually. It was an informal time for us to do some revision. And I had said to Old Boy and Nancy, should we get together at normal Greek lesson time and just, go through the exercises? And as such, I'd arranged an informal get together with the three of us. In fact, it was just me and Old Boy to begin with. Nancy saw us and jumped in. So the three of us were going. And then all of a sudden, there was Ammon and Piero, he's not a Greek student, and Snappy, and then a great crowd just jumped in on it. And I thought, hey, what's happening here? And he just let rip. Somebody here says I can't teach Koine Greek. I thought, who's that? Not me. And he was just furious, really ranting.
Right.
And I was in shock by that time, thinking he must be me. And he says, you know who you are, you get out, you leave my dojo now, blah, 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 blah. I thought, well, it's obvious that whoever just disappears, it's going to be me anyway, so I might as well try and say something. But I was literally trembling and in shock. I couldn't talk.
Right.
So he then, got rid of me, and then actually conducted a very nice lesson, because Kaskir was recording them at the time. And then at the end of that lesson, there were a couple of phrases I thought, whoa, 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 big red flags. Because during his rant, he said, you've been undermining me. All right. And I thought, okay, that's a significant phrase. Now, I hadn't known about the talk that Snappy had with him. I took it that me pushing back on the Lady Babylon tab, the public tab, was undermining him. To some extent, yes, it was an undermining, because I was getting people to question it. But you should be open to question. You shouldn't be, I'm the unaccountable authority. You've got to just agree with everything I say. It was supposed to be a place of discussion, but it wasn't getting discussed. And I thought, this is cult dynamics going on here.
It's narrative.
Yeah. So having finished his revision session with them, he said, "I apologize for the purge. I have no boss. I can do whatever I like." I thought, blinking heck. When I heard that, and I thought, come on, people, wake up, wake up. So having been chucked out of the dojo, some people got to hear of it. None of the people that were present reached out to me. I wrote to them.
Right.
They didn't reach back. Kaskia did, because I asked him a very simple question. I said, "Did you have a recording of of what happened at the beginning?" And he said, "Well, frankly, no, I wasn't expecting it." And by the time I got the recording, stuff ready, there was only a few seconds left, so he didn't bother, and then just carried on with the rest of it. So Kaskia responded, but in that he also said, because just prior to this, Armin had absolutely ranted at Ariel publicly on the tab and told Ariel to go. And Ariel was totally shocked, thinking, what? So he just chucked Ariel off, and then he chucked me off. And this was leading up to the time when Rob was about to open his private dedicated server, to which you needed invitation. And obviously I wasn't going to be invited, nor Ariel. Now, I didn't know actually the reasons behind why Ariel was, I found out since. But the ostensible reason was that we were still worshippers of Yahweh, that Ariel was stuck in his Jewish ways and I was stuck in my Christian ways because I was defending Jesus, but I'm not a Christian.
Right.
And in fact, I'd been on episode 2 of season 2. I'm still there. Right at the beginning, he interviews me. And the question is, how did reason lead you out of Christianity? So, it's public, so why is sort of, and I'm still getting that when I read through Reddit slanders of me as well, that, she's just a Christian and whatever else. I thought, nope. Anyway, that aside, that was the beginning of then having to be the outcasts, and connected with Ariel, who, having the server by himself anyway, we had a space in his server, and other people who were cult aware and had seen what had happened also joined us and realized this is not a healthy community, this is toxic. So they came over as well. It was a long, not always a happy time, because there was a lot of conflict, particularly stirred up by one person who had good intentions but really offended too many people, and they left. But anyway, I carried on monitoring, carried on watching, and trying to work out who is Armin, what is he aiming at, does he believe what he says? Is he deliberately deceiving, or is he deceived himself? Or, so this is where I will start the presentation, because I to begin with, had no idea. All right, how do I get a big screen? There we go. Right. I'll call him the ringmaster because everybody knows he's a showman. That's not meant to be pejorative. Okay, he's a great showman. He's got great stagecraft, and he's certainly the leader who orchestrates everything together. Right. So is he a truth teller? Is he a satirist? Is he a narcissist? Or is he sincerely mistaken? Okay. Now I've tried to be as honest as I can going through these options. Really, truth teller, I have to just score out immediately. I have seen too much in the way of, I don't believe he's that thick. He knows what those texts say, and yet he's not saying what they say. All right. So there's an awful lot of misdirection, deceit, story spinning, myth making, you name it. He's not telling the truth. All right. And there's lots of other reasons which I'll get into. Now, is he a satirist? Now, these are some reasons. I might as well just read what I've got here because I put this together in a piece.
Right.
Now, I'm convinced by so many things throughout Hillman's history that he's not teaching the core concept of his Lady Babylon theory purely just as a satire of Jesus, despite that being a safe and a very apparently reasonable way to accept what he's doing. And I understand Mandy, who can see the layers of satire that he does, and I can recognize this lampooning of Jesus, the exaggerations. I can see that as well. All right, so I don't dismiss all of his satirization, but the core concept, does he believe that? And is he actually trying to present that as a truth? Right. That's what I'm really after. All right, so he hams up his presentations and is compelled to contrive outlandish, shocking connections from a diversity of irrelevant texts to entertain the devotees. Yeah, that's obvious. But in all seriousness, it could also be an intentional revenge on academia for rejecting him, as well as on the church and its sexual regulations that had caused him personal trauma. Now, he's already made hints on Harmonic Atheist that he's experienced clergy sexual abuse himself. Now, his hints, I'm not saying for sure, but it came out of his own mouth in a way to Tim Mills, the host, about his deep personal connection to Jesus, likening it to somebody who confessed themselves of having that sort of connection through clergy abuse. So I'm leaving that in the air, but it would certainly have been a very great cause of trauma and a very strong reason to dislike the church. Not saying it was, but it's something to consider. And he testified in his second Danny Jones interview, the trauma he went through Protestant purity culture, trying not to masturbate, trying to stay celibate, all of that shame and the guilt that accrued because of him trying to keep to this false ideal. All right. And then age 21, he while finishing his classics BA, he's reading Aristotle, who is exalting nature, and it led to his liberation into libertinism. Go with nature, go with how you've been made. And he obviously has a very strong libido. Mm-hmm. So his reading of Mark 14:51-52, he said, was the final straw for his exit from Christianity, which he'd obviously seen in terms of child abuse from when he read that. Couldn't understand it any other way. And it became his stated life quest to get to the bottom of these mysterious verses. So soon after that, he went to Israel. Now, he makes claims that he had his commissioning to find the Antichrist, the antidote. And I think this is possibly a retrospective myth-making about himself. Okay. I'm not sure that it actually happened. Anyway, so it's unsurprising that he chose the pharmacological side of the classics literature for his MA, PhD, coupled with bacteriology and a BSc in botanical toxins for his studies. So that makes me think he's got himself over $100,000 worth of debt just to be a satirist, or to seriously try and understand Mark 14:52 in terms of drug use. So that's something is worth holding. So what about the significance in his momentous choice of life partner? Now, his marriage to an expert in death inducers, she was an anesthesiologist, which is basically putting somebody into a near death. That's surely no coincidence. What about his academic articles and his early talks? That was at the Cannabis Culture Conference, also the Gloucester Writers Group. He did one with Karen Tate. Then eventually he went on to John Price's Sacred Speaks. Now, all of these certainly his academic articles, it was still at an early time when he was still trying to get himself accepted in academia. You wouldn't write things about Jesus with tying them to Medea and a sexually produced communion rite. You wouldn't write that in a serious article that was published unless you actually thought there was some substance to it and that you wanted recognition for that. You wouldn't write in that sort of heavy academic book something as trivial as a satire. All right, so that's again another reason why I don't think he's all satire. All right. And also, he was very hurt and offended by the Bryn Mawr review of the Chemical News. Now, it was in French. Philippe Charlier was pretty scathing, actually. I'll just read a couple of, I've got it here. I got it through Google Translate, and I've got some of it. It says, this book will not appeal to academics. First, because the author, a physician, which he's not really, settles scores with his PhD panel and accuses those who didn't follow his hypotheses of conservative fanaticism. Second, because the author asks far too much of himself and makes him say more than he is reasonable. Certainly, it seems legitimate to rethink the role of the use of toxic substances, particularly psychoactive substances, in past populations, starting with Greco-Roman antiquity. But to go from there to wanting to make them a common, even almost systematic consumer product is truly excessive. You can't so easily transform a civilization into a population of drug addicts. And then he said about Athenian democracy. Right, and then he comes in with this wonderful paragraph. We will see that the arrogance and amateurism of this author are each sufficient arguments to advise against purchasing this veritable accumulation of assertions without critical analysis. That's actually true. Moreover, when the author's mini-biography mentions that his research has been published in the academic journal Pharmacy and History, excuse me, let us point out that this presentation is quite misleading because the author has only authored one article in Pharmacy and History that concerns a very specific and very limited part of his research. Hillman, DC, the salamander as a drug in Nicander's writings. And then there's the citation. Right, I won't do any more, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
That his writing style, in a way, is similar in the way he presents in Lady Babylon. He makes leaps without really substantiating them. He's always leaping, always jumping.
Right.
All right.
Correct.
And that there's not a solid line of logic. You know, this will then lead to that. And you can take these into consideration, and between them, you can then move on to that. He calls it a non-linear teaching style, which is, it's a valid way to teach, where it's more like if you're baking a cake, you might whip up your eggs and keep that over there. You might cream your sugar and your flour, your butter together and keep it over there. And you might sieve your flour with your cocoa powder and keep it over there. And then eventually you'll combine it all in a certain order, in a certain way, and put it in the tin and in the oven. But the bits that he's preparing separately in order to make into the whole, each of those has got some flaw in it, some assumption that's been made about it, some misreading, some textual trickery that's jumped around in the lexica and found a different connotation. And then he pulls them all together and ta-da, there's this wonderful cake. But because it's so scatty, it's very hard to actually follow what he's doing unless he's slow back and you make a note of, right, he's going to put this in, he's going to pull that in and then tie it all together at the end. But it keeps that allure of distance because you're never really quite sure you understood. So you're always hanging, wanting more. It's a very clever way of keeping you hooked in there, really, to some extent. All right, I'll stop sharing on that. Now, that wasn't shared, was it? That was just my tab, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was just reading off my tab.
Right.
Okay, so you can edit that bit out. Right, I will now move on to, is he a narcissist? Come on. Why is that not coming down? I want this tab. Why is that not moving? Right, I want to be in this tab. It's not going down. Why is it not going down?
I was going to say, do you see anywhere on the screen where it says share this tab instead?
You might have to use your arrow keys instead of clicking. You might have to press left or right.
I've only got a keypad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have got arrow keys, but it's not doing anything. Chris, I'm on this one.
Right. Oh, make sure you're on the actual thing. Make sure you're on the actual slideshow and not in the.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Right. This, although I don't normally listen to Peterson, I hadn't actually realized it was him. It's not under a Jordan Peterson logo on this particular video, but because I'm into narcissism, I thought this particular excerpt
must first grasp the monumental and precarious architecture of the narcissistic psyche. The narcissist has constructed what is best described as a false self, a grandiose and inflated persona designed for one purpose, and one purpose only: to solicit a continuous stream of external validation, which they call narcissistic supply. This false self is a fictional character, heroic, brilliant, uniquely victimized, and supremely important. But here's the crucial point: it is an edifice with no foundation. It is a hollow god. And like any false idol, it requires constant worship from the outside world to maintain the illusion of its divinity. This endless need for validation is not mere arrogance. It is a desperate existential necessity. Without the reflection of admiration in the eyes of others, the false self begins to crumble, threatening to expose the void it was built to conceal. This is why a simple challenge, a boundary, or a refusal to play along is not perceived as a minor disagreement. To the narcissist, it is a seismic threat to their entire psychological structure. It is a crack in the idol. When you say, "I see what you're doing," or "that's not my responsibility," you are refusing to provide the worship the false self requires. You are, in that moment, an apostate, a non-believer, and your dissent threatens to reveal to the narcissist, and worse, to the world, that their God is a fraud. This is the critical distinction between healthy self-confidence and pathological grandiosity. The confident person has an internal locus of control. Their self-worth is generated from within based on competence and experience. The grandiose person has an external locus of control. Their sense of self is a fragile reflection, entirely dependent on the opinions and reactions of others. Your words of truth don't challenge their strength. They expose their absolute and terrifying weakness. So what lies beneath this glittering, grandiose mask? What is the terrible secret that the fortress of narcissism is built to protect? It is a core of profound, unmitigated shame. At the center of the narcissist is a deeply held belief in their own worthlessness and inadequacy. This is the wound that never healed, the primary terror from which their entire personality is a flight. They have spent their lives running from this shame, constructing an elaborate alternate reality where they are the opposite of everything they fear themselves to be.
That is correct.
Wow.
That
I
is
feel like I
correct.
relate with all of that.
As much as Peterson's almost become a narcissist himself, maybe, but at least he understands.
No,
Yeah.
that's a great layout of it all, for sure.
Or like a lot of what narcissists do is they project. So it's deflecting it from themselves to say, look, you're looking at me as the one who's analyzing them out there. but actually he knows what narcissists are like very much himself, possibly. All
That's
right.
why I've always felt a similarity. Now, I've changed a good bit. Some people that criticize my show will disagree, but I've changed a good bit just slowly over 38 years. And, after some psychedelic experiences, the ego kind of cracks. I see God was mad at me for being such a shitbird, So I've done these slow changes, but I kind of still do it at my pace. And just being transparent, I think I relate to the personality he has, because I was always the kind of guy who wanted to golden apple people's lives. I wanted to disturb their little metaphysical pie chart sliver in their being. And I don't know why. It was like there was a demon a hold of me, or at least that's how I think people would have described it 2,000 years ago. Like, and I had this drive, and I feel that in the work. I feel this, I'm going to say stuff to really get them going, which I see in other kinds of comedy, or even other kinds of guys do, like Satanist priests. They kind of have their own little religion. They have, it's their version of it. Obviously, there's a lot of that you see in that channel, but I'll let you continue.
Okay, then. Right. I've lost it again. Help. Right, there we go. Sorry. All right. Now, he has measures of self-protection to ensure his supply of validation. Now, I'm sure anybody watching his show will recognize this neutralizing of critics. There's a whole list there. Don't particularly have to read them all. But what I will do is pick out the ones that that basically I am highlighted in. Now, this was news to me.
Oh, I need this for Allie. I need this for Allie Rowan.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I can look at your British face yet again.
Who's Allie Rowan?
Could you please respond to Allie Rowan's comments and critiques about your work? Allie Rowan says that
She presented an in-depth takedown of you and your translations of anything related to Jesus Christ. Her takedown is even complete with allegations that you demanded followers in your private Discord group. You have a private Discord group? To basically dream rape certain people you have vendettas against.
No, absolutely not. Let me correct that for the record. I absolutely
she
correct
has stepped into the arena, this guy says.
Yes. No, she hasn't stepped into the arena because...
Look, copy and paste her link.
Let me tell you exactly what's going on. Allie Rowan is a former student who tried to join my dojo, and I kicked her out. She's right in the middle. I kicked her out, and I did it very publicly in front of everyone. And why did I do that? Because behind my back, she was telling the other students, he doesn't know Koine. He knows classical Greek. He doesn't know Koine. So none of what he's saying can apply to the Bible. And when I find out she was saying that, one thing I refuse to abide among my students is dishonesty. Right? Yeah. Right. You should tell me in front of students what you think, lady. Right. But so I kicked her out. And I made her join the chorus of the frustrated women. Right? Right? This is a Victorian chorus. This is what happens when you don't let women get all of their frustration and all of their power that's bottled up. Right? Because men don't have this. Right? This is the way they're looking at it. They have all of that magic inside of them. And in order for them to channel that, in order for them to become that cycle that is the moon, and to understand that sex magic, right? And people are always asking, why is there so much magic that has to do with sex? It's completely based in sex. Yeah. If you don't have the power to channel that,
that clip was Patreon only, by the way, which is why almost none of us have seen it.
Yeah,
I've never seen it. Yeah.
No, and I hadn't seen it either because it was posted on Reddit, and I have friends in Reddit that alerted me to it. Now, I can absolutely guarantee, and I've got proof of that, but I will go to it later, of how that. Actually, I could probably do it there. I'm not sure whether to run through it here. Yeah, okay, I will run through it here. I've got I'll go to YouTube. Right.
Notice the run, Kip, run thumbnail.
Yeah.
That's the end of that. I've missed it before.
Yeah.
Now, where has my? Do you know what? He's rubbed it. It says 59 comments. Where are they?
You might have to go. You might have to go sort by newest first.
Okay.
Or all or something.
Oh yeah.
Well, top comments. No.
Oh, it probably.
He's.
Is it on one of?
All right, newest. Okay, right.
Yeah, newest first.
Okay, now here is me giving him the record, making it straight with the facts. Now everything there is hard fact.
Yeah.
Now the first lot is an exchange in the Public Lady Babylon tab of Myth and Law, where I was asked to.
Oh no.
Okay.
Sorry.
Which I did. Now, Ammon objected to my use of a word, cosmos, which I perfectly understood and explained its two major connotations, the one used in classical Greek and the newer one used in Koine Greek. Ammon was incorrect, and I proved it so. I don't think he took kindly to it, especially since he had literally just evicted someone else under false pretenses for disagreeing with him before he responded to me, and that was him chucking Ariel out. Now, I can actually provide the proof that I was not saying anything to Snappy I had not already expressed publicly. I had taken screenshots of the exchanges in the Lady Babylon tab, which I believe was the real cause for my eviction. Now, I had publicly proved Ammon was wrong because he had not accounted for the semantic shift of cosmos in Koine Greek, where it undoubtedly did have a new connotation of people. Now, see for yourself. I don't know if I will go through them all, but honestly, if you want to go to that, I can leave the
link. Put the link in the private chat or something.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that so that you can do it. See, I could go through them all, but you see, I've got to jump around.
You showed them to me before. I went through them all. Basically, it's not a very genuine exchange by the other person. Yeah. That's a long story short, basically.
Okay, so I said, now to prove my innocence in the face of Ammon's slander. Twice I wrote a DM to Ammon requesting a conversation over my concerns. Now, evidence is in the fourth screenshot link down below down there, because this is my conversation with Snappy, my DMs with Snappy. I wasn't trying to join. We were already doing Unit 3 at the time and in a pause in the lessons for revision. I and another student were using the VC to do a spotted revision. I've talked about all of this anyway. So Ammon started yelling. Someone must immediately leave his dojo because they were saying he couldn't teach Koine. Blah, blah, blah. Whole messages contained in these screenshots. Now, this is my conversation with Snappy, which again, I won't have to pull up. So I'm making completely valid point about Ammon's exegetical methodology, which can and does produce misleading translations. This point is that as classical Greek became simplified, the meanings of some words eventually became defunct in preference for a new one in Koine, the parlance of the common people. It was also used by the academics, but it's just how words shift. You gay in the Victorian times doesn't mean what gay meant in the 60s with the Flintstones. It doesn't mean what gay means now.
Right.
It shifts. And cosmos had shifted. All right. So I've repeatedly observed how Ammon misuses the lexicon. He will lift a word which is perfectly well translated in its original context, whether it's biblical or not, then look at the list of connotations of it in the LSJ. That list of different connotations is there because any word is refined by the surrounding passage it's found in. If it's found in a medical or cult text, then it will take on a meaning that fits those contexts. But the quasi-historical narratives about a Jewish rabbi and his men is an utterly different genre of literature where references to medical or cult terms don't belong within the original portrait of these characters throughout the entire narrative in all four Gospels. Yeah, you can't just take one or two little passages. You've got to look at the whole sweep of the Gospels to get the idea of this guy's character and what he was doing. But what Ammon has succeeded in fooling his hordes of people with is to select about 1 to 2% at most of all the hundreds of lemmas, headwords in the lexicon, found in the Gospel narrative and entire New Testament, and performing this illegitimate swapping of connotations. He does this in order to paint a different portrait in the minds of his listeners, greatly aided by the AI images, Teddy's music, his rhetoric and stagecraft. He has himself created his own new context, so that as he finds other words whose meanings he can illegitimately change to suit his agenda, they appear to fit and make sense as part of the new incorrect portrait he is painting over the biblical texts in both New and Old Testaments. Okay, so there's some instructions to assist him. Right, to now, he did put it this way. When we were in Ariel's server to begin with, another guy called Rat King, he had been quite close with Ammon, and they had quite a bit in common. And, you know, he'd connected in 2022 as well. And Rat shared something that he had been sitting in on at the end of one of the shows. This is what tended to happen. Ammon would do his half-hour show, and he would then go to the VC of the Myth and Lore tab for the Lady Babylon, and they would just hang out and talk and go through it a bit together. Now, Ammon didn't always do it, but one time he went, he did. I wonder if I can pull these up. Yeah, see, I've got to leave this, unfortunately. Sorry, I have a cat. She's very beautiful. Come. Say hello. This is Molly.
But it is.
She just loves. She will walk in front of my face like this, waving her sickly tail, and I'm trying to type.
Knocking glasses over.
All right. Now I would have to leave, and then you won't be able to see it, so I won't be able to.
Okay.
But I can. No. These are up on my talk with Jason Horsley, and they're also up on my talk with Zach Miller on What Your Pastor Didn't Tell You, but he's now renamed that and repositioned it and called it Ammon Hillman Unmasked. So you'll find my interview called Exposed in Ammon Hillman Unmasked, which is Zach's other more dedicated Ammon channel. All right. So the evidence is plain for all to see that I am not the one who is lying. All right. He calls me a liar. Nope. What right does he have to insinuate anything about my intimacy with my husband after 42 increasingly enjoyable years and still doing very magically? Thank you very much. So now I have every right to raise a very strong objection to the slanderous mischaracterization of my mental state here. This is not the only slander that has been propagated about me either. So I'll add that I do not resent Ammon evicting me. I knew my polite academic pushback would ultimately make me too unwelcome, just as happened with Neil. In fact, during Ammon's rant, he did let slip the real reason he evicted me. He said I was undermining him. And then afterwards apologized to the group for the purge, adding, I have no boss, I can do whatever I like, which I've already talked to you. I'd forgotten this is on here. All right, so that's what we have. As my defense, there's actually a second reply, but I won't need to go through it all now. I can put that Reddit link. What is also amusing, which I will say once I'm back up there. Okay, right. So that's to the Reddit post, and you will see Slappy is also continuing to maintain his version of events that I was. The Reddit. There's only 11 comments in that Reddit post. Now that Reddit post, believe it or not, is one of 2 pinned comments, featured posts. I've got Ammon's AMA and Ammon makes a response to Ali Rowan. It's only those 2 that are pinned still, so I must be infamous.
Just a question. Do you know who runs that Reddit page?
I know Eon, the Eon is one of the mods, but I don't think
Aeon has stepped down for being a mod. Right now it's Helpful Obligation, Grime Minister, and I think
Screamers Monday.
Maybe, but the people, the mods are very overzealous Ammonites for sure. If we're going to use that term, but one of the mods is kind of infamous because it's who tried to chastise one of Rich Docker's videos, and she got a very, very nice nickname because of it.
Okay.
Yeah, she. I saw her comment down there, so I was like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah. Now I do still have a post. When I was first joined Reddit, I put the post up called "Does Mark 14:51-52 really say what Ammon claims?" All right. Now this is where I will go back to my list to hear. You've heard him mocking other. You've heard him mocking other people as well. And he produces false dichotomies because you've got they're either academics who are only interested in making money and keeping to the university's rules, otherwise they will lose their funding, or you've got YouTubers who are grifting and only want to sell their merchandise. And the false dichotomy is that if you're earning money through what you're saying against him, therefore it's immediately untrue that they're leading you down the back alley. We've heard him say all of that. It's a false dichotomy. There's very many, and or that they are, Christian apologists trying to, defend their fairy tale Jesus. That's not true, because you've got all the many great secular scholars who will look at the Bible text just like they would at a piece of Shakespeare or Dioscorides or Dio Cassius. It makes no difference. There's no compulsion to be false. These people are doing their earnest best to understand the text and provide the evidence that they found. There's no false dichotomy here. Now, hiding the evidence, this is quite fun. Now, after he chucked me out, I was still watching the shows and I was still commenting. And every show I would highlight where there was some dishonesty going on or something that really needed questioning, or produce some alternate fact that made it evident that he'd either not known about this fact or he was ignoring it. But it was something that weighed heavily against what he was promoting. So I probably became a bit of a pain in the neck to him, because all the time he kept hiding the evidence. Now, for instance, why? I want that link. It's supposed to, there we go. Right, okay, it says share this tab instead.
Yes,
right,
yes.
So I'll put it back.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, stop, hang on. Stop, thank you. Right, I will share this tab instead. Right, have you got that now?
Yes.
There you go.
This is an example that I've screen recorded of my view as Ali Rowan of the Lady Babylon comments. After Ammon does his thing, which I possibly means to reserve for moderator review. I think that's something I've seen that you can do. Certain people's comments can be hidden from public view. They're still visible to the person who made the comment, and they're visible to the moderators, but they're not visible publicly. All right. Now, here is a show called Lestis. All right. And I made a substantial couple of comments. All right. So there's me. And then I opened it up. And then I opened it up even more. All right. There's quite a lot there, a lot of factual points that I've made. All right. So all of this here, which is packed with facts and questions and alternatives.
A question for you, Allie. So with all these questions that you've asked over time, have you had any, what you would call respectful dialogue with anybody in that group? Somebody willing to actually have that conversation? Or has it always just been running away or mocking or blocking? Or
when I was still in the group, the only person who did try to engage with me was Rat King. And we had a good discussion, and it wasn't that he was opposing me. He was saying, yeah, you've made some good points. I also have another instance where the Eon said, you have made great points here. And he even said, to begin with, I wanted to dismiss what you were saying, but I could see that these things need further discussion. And this happened the day before Amun came in on the, what do you call it? When I was discussing Cosmos, it was earlier on that same day, actually. And if Amun had been reading that and seeing that even the Eon was saying, yes, you've made some very valid criticisms here, this needs to be discussed further. All right. This was polite conversation. This was not me being disruptive or rude. I'm just raising.
Yeah, no, I get that. I've had interactions with you, and just my own interactions, even if you and I just don't disagree, if we disagree with each other, it's been respectful.
Okay.
It's not been something that it's not been. And I'm just saying that so other people that might have not had interactions with you might look at somebody like Snappy or anybody else in that group and think that you're doing what they're saying. But guess what? That particular person has had various history with not just you, with people on this channel as well.
Yeah.
And that's something Witch Doctor can get into a little bit too if he wants to, but we all know that particular individual well. And I agree with you with that video that you posted with Jordan Peterson, that those people are that way and that it's very weak.
Yeah.
It's very weak. And I say this as an academic. So I'm a NASA funded graduate, research, published everything.
Okay.
I work in industry. I work for Fortune 100 companies, and it's all about the respect. And if you don't have that and you can't be open, to me, that just means you don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
And my own experience with these guys are very similar to them in this room, and even more nasty. Where Marcel and Witch Doctor had a show previously on another topic that they were blaming Marcel. And I'm going to say this publicly: if anybody is scared or threatened by Marcel, that's just hilarious.
You're so cute.
Honestly, if you're scared of Marcel, you're a very weak individual. Not to put Marcel down, but Marcel is like he's not out here to hurt anybody. You know?
I know what you mean by that.
Yeah, you're inoffensive, and in fact, I'll say this for Marcel's credit. He was quite new to Myth and Law at the time when I did my Jason interview. He had no idea who I was. So he happened to be in on the tab it was on the tab when I was doing it live and they were making commentaries. And Marcel was asking, who is she? All right. And there was a litany of untruths coming out, but Marcel was saying, well, look at this that she said, that it can't all be bad, basically. And then I hadn't actually seen this exchange, so I didn't know that you'd been sort of querying things, Marcel. And the next thing I knew, I had a request from this Marcel person to connect with Buck and Ali on Discord. I thought, well, okay, don't often get requests, but I thought I'll try and see who this is. And you introduced yourself, and you very soon agreed with me that there were cult dynamics going on. And you shared with me about Rob leaving the server. I thought, gosh, you're not going to give me something like that if you're somebody trying to trap me. And we've carried on a very respectful conversation. And you also kept my confidence, because I had tried to have another alternative presence in myth and lore, and you knew who it was, and you never let on. So thank you.
No problem. I mean, like, I'm like, I
so
just wanted to hear everyone's side of every story, because the truth was never ever
Yeah.
never put out. You get what I'm saying. Oh,
yeah, and this is absolute 100% respect to you, because you wanted to know both sides, whereas everybody else were just happy to stay in their echo chamber and in their own bubble and be the in-group and make sure they outed and made even more unwelcome anybody who was in the out-group. But bless you, you reached out and you've made a good connection, and we've still got it. So appreciate it.
And here we are now.
Yeah, and here we are now. Absolutely.
Is there anything? Did you want to present more?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
I do have a bit more. Okay, we'll get there. Yeah, the usual projecting, the deflecting, shutting down communication. Oh, actually, I hadn't got, but basically the hiding the evidence. When you go to the public tab, I scrolled right down through all the just the headings of all the different comments, looking for the Ali Rowan symbol. I'm not there, so the public cannot see me at all. But I just showed you screeds of me having written.
If you want your stuff brought back up, just let me know.
That's all right. That's fine. Oops, where are we? I should be on the stream. Yeah, I can see you now. Right, I think I will put back. Hang on, share this tab. That's what I want. Okay. So, yeah, he shut down communication. I found that I would sometimes try to make a direct reply to somebody on the YouTube comments, and it just wouldn't post. I don't know.
Yeah.
If there is something that you can do to stop particular people talking to you, but certainly a lot of people were just shutting me down and not allowing me to make any responses to what they were saying. Threats, misinformation, misrepresentation of an argument, exploitation of weakness. Yeah, okay, I don't know Greek.
The whole group is very good at all of those things.
Absolutely.
There's somebody in the Discord or in the Reddit right now putting up very good arguments against Amon's translations. And all of them are just like, well, since you're anonymous, your arguments are invalid. It's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
It's like, what?
I know, you're a coward. You don't show your face. Very, very puerile, really. And of course, you get the attribution of motive, which is, some nefarious reason that you oppose him, that you're jealous, or that you're grifting off him, or whatever. Now, he can polish the image, lots of claims of integrity. The number of times he said, I'm only translating the text. I have no theory. I'm just bringing you the truth. I cannot lie. The devil told me you mustn't tell a single lie, not a little one. No. All these protestations of innocence. It really. Yeah. The more he makes, the more he. In fact, I'd almost say every time in a show he's made that protestation.
Yeah.
Also in that show, he's just bloody well been lying.
He made fun of me for selling T-shirts and stuff too, and it was like, I was going to do it anyway, but okay.
Yeah. So he also has claims of the special insight. He's got this communication with the muse, and he has this special authority because he claims Satan has commissioned him to do this, and he claims that I was talking to the devil the other day, or the devil told me I need to say this to you. He's got this sort of aura, and the same with this. I never actually said about it. The dream raping episode was a real thing. Now, the person who commented to Danny Jones had it wrong. I never said that they were in Amun's Discord, or that I can't remember how, that there was some inaccuracy in what this stranger had remembered of what I'd said. All right, so I know at another time Snappy picks that up and jumps on it, saying I'm wrong, but no, that's not what I said. It's what this other person thought I'd said.
Right.
But the thing was that he did ask people to basically concentrate their energy, or whatever you want to call it. And this was obviously during a VC. And I think Amun was picking up that Rat King was reluctant. So he shot over an email to Rat King, very briefly saying, basically, get on, do it. Don't forget this man that he wanted them to dream rape, wants a 12-year-old to marry their rapist, that sort of thing. He was trying to go against a really quite obnoxious patriarchal preacher called Doug Wilson and his wife. And that is a real thing. It happened. I've got the email from that Rat King shared, and the exchange in our in our own Discord with Ariel about it, and a screenshot.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, you've seen that. So that was a real thing that happened. But even at that time, I was skeptical, and I was saying he's just creating a persona, an edgy, I've got a satanic powers, look at me. It was all part of him laying out reasons for people to look up to him right at the beginning. And I still see that. All his other claims of incubus, there's holes in them all over the place, actually. I could say an awful lot more, but I am very skeptical of him actually having any occult powers. Saying that, a lot of people have testified that they do have these weird dreams, that he comes to them in their dreams, whatever that means. So that aside, he doesn't have incubus powers. I know that.
When I first made my Lady Babylon dedicated Discord, my own, many women came to me and said that they've had him come to them in their dreams. It's a really weird phenomenon, man. I've had at least maybe 10 different people tell me about it.
Yeah, so something's happening, whether it's suggestiveness that people have gone to bed thinking about him, or I have no idea. I have no explanation, but I don't dismiss these people's testimonies. All right. And he talks about it as well. Now, the bullshitting that he does in supposed academic pushbacks against his critics. Do you remember the Ronin one he said against Neil, who brought that fantastic thing about Neoniscos? Yeah, that you hosted. Witch Doctor?
Oh
my gosh.
Yes, he hosted it with Cross Bible.
What was the passage? Oh, on Neoniscos.
The Neoniscos, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear this.
Okay. And it was, hammer blow after hammer blow after hammer blow, proving that Neoniscos was not a prepubescent child.
Yeah.
And then he did this bullshitting show afterwards, trying to wangle around certain very well attested, easily understood passages, especially the one where the Neoniscos is described as the fourth stage, the fourth group of 7 years.
Right.
Yeah. So it is the age 21 to 28, and it's the time where the body is completing its growth. That's very, very clear in what Hippocrates described about it.
Right.
So, that was one. There are other more broad definitions, but this group of sevens is very clear. And there were other words that were even peri-prepubescent. I can't remember what they are now offhand. But and you see, you've got the pais, which is the child, and then you go to the ephebos, and then the meraikon, and then the Neoniscos. So,
Yes.
there's Neoniscos is never next to Pais. There's always other adolescent groups in between.
Well, Roger, I had one episode on the different age ranges.
Yeah.
I was really trying to stretch that to prepubescent, but it seems pretty clear that it is, in fact, post-pubescent. Young soldiers throwing logs. That's what Stephen Nelson was telling me about. And I was like, okay. So the general consensus is that it is post-pubescent. And, we've all seen 18-year-olds getting on the bus to join the army. They look like babies. And so Amon, saying a kid this, I still get called a kid. And so I think there's so much poetic license there.
Yeah. I mean, to me, a 15-year-old is a kid too, but it's not a child. You know what I mean? There's a big difference, right?
We had a couple of figurines we showed with clay and artist renditions. I mean, it's just look at some of the artists and some of the artwork that becomes so uber famous. It's trash sometimes. It's just it's the story behind the artist that made it so big or whatever. And so when it comes to proportions and stuff, we were all looking at that, and Stephen had a couple of suggestions, and I was like, yeah, back then it's kind of hard to really when a small little figurine with not a lot of details, it might look like a 9-year-old, but the guy's trying to draw someone in between. But post-pubescent though, not that androgynous pre-pubescent, 7-year-old girls and 7-year-old boys are almost built the same, but once you start getting a little bigger, it starts to veer. And then I had one picture by Antonio de Correggio where the guy, the Neoniscos, just looked, younger than people are comfortable with. But once again, this is another artist, and typically artists were never fans of religion. So there's all kinds of smart Alex stuff thrown in there. And I try to be transparent about that, but I did bring it up just to see what they might say. And of course it was kind of like, well, yeah, but it's a painting. So
yeah. I've gone into it a lot as well in my own blog. So, there's
but I want to say something that you said that to me is big on your list here. Special authority and bullshitting. To me, it's the historicity that is really lacking. And anybody that researches, which I know they don't, and part of the problem is the echo chamber. So once he says something, the cult takes it and runs with it. And if you say anything else, they attack you for it, right? That. But the problem is all of them are getting it wrong. And if you just watch, even last night, I was on there, it's very ethnocentric. This Greek first, he said himself, there would be no mystery without the Greek, which is a complete lie. And if anybody knew the history, the Greek took from the Minoans, and the Minoans were not Greek. The culture was completely different. The language, linear A, is completely different than linear B. So if anybody actually looks at this and then he looks and attacks the Jews and goes, well, they stole it. Well, okay, but did you know that the Greeks actually stole a lot of their gods and mythos from the Minoans as well? They got it from there. And so they were doing the same thing. And then on top of it, when he says he acts like the Greek was in some vacuum, that they just were come up on a vacuum. They weren't. Look at Lady Vix. We know they weren't. So if anybody, Lady Vix in France is a large grave that they found that is 500 BC. Okay. And they found Lady Vix with a bunch of Etruscan material, artwork, a cauldron from Greece. So they knew that they were trading, interacting, and cultures are mixing. And this is a Celtic culture, right, that she was from. So the idea that this was just a vacuum chamber and they were the only ones to do it, no, we see it all over the world, even in La Lindosa in Mesoamerica at late Pleistocene. So these people, Michael Harner, if anybody in their group is going to attack all these other scholars like Michael Harner about the psychedelics and looking at cultures, they're completely lost. But this is the power of the cult that you're getting into.
Yeah. And in fact, I've been very interested in the Tepala cultures over in southeast Turkey. The Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe as well. They apparently Brian Murarescu pointed out that there were traces of oxalates, which is a brewing residue, and it was barley. Now, if they're growing barley, you've got ergot. What else might have been happening? And in Karahan Tepe, you've got this peculiar chamber, which has obviously got pillars to support a roof, and there's a sort of like a light portal that will come in and illuminate this face. And there's one big sort of penis-shaped support as well. It's all very mysterious, and makes you think, actually, if there was a roof on that and an incense going, you've got this wonderful little suffumigation chamber, and you're waiting for the light from the dawn to come in and pierce this and have this face illuminated. The light travels across the face as the sun comes up and over the hill. Just imagine the sort of entheogenic experience these guys could have had. And this is 9,000 BC.
Yeah.
Well before, there's no way that it's all started in Greece. Well, we know that anyway.
Yeah.
I did have one picture in the book that is not in my copy that I've been editing because the pictures were too big to transfer the whole file. And so it's in an older copy of the book, and it is, I'm not saying it's always entheogenic related, but they did find an alabastron. Mm-hmm. And a picture with a little diagram, and I gotta find that picture again, but it was Göbekli Tepe. And I was like, yes, here we go. Kind of something to similar, but all the way, back.
Yeah.
And I'll add this because I was looking it up this morning, which is highly relevant. So if anybody goes, the Minoans were just early Greek or Proto-Greeks, no, they weren't. And we know this through the DNA. And their DNA is shared there, but they also have a lot coming from the Iranian area, which we know because the drugs came from there. I mean, I can't believe these guys literally listen to this with a god named Hypnos, which has poppy plants outside of his cave, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Where did the poppy plant come from? It didn't come from Greece. It's not native to that area, the Mediterranean. It came from Iran.
Yeah.
So all that Iranian Silk Road trade, but if you look up Silk Road, it's like they say it's this ran by the empires. No, this was run. We know this in the actual academic literature when the poppy came in. And it's really funny, Allie, because it lines up with the biblical age of when they said the Garden of Eden happened 6,000 years prior. And we know that because we can track the opium movement into that area. But we also know that when they're talking about the food, they're not talking about wheat harvesting, because that's what the modern, Christians will tell you. It was wheat harvesting that God was teaching them. No, because they were already cultivating wheat 4,000 years prior to that. So it couldn't have been wheat.
Nah. Yeah, well, you just have to take the whole of Genesis with a very, very big pinch of salt anyway. Yeah. Anyway, I'll just carry on running down here, but I think really they're almost self-explanatory, but I wanted to bring this one. He supplies their needs. Yeah, they want entertainment. They want to feel important. They want to feel they're an elite group with the inside information. They're on this mission to bring down monism. There's all this sort of hype to cohere the group, give them a vision, give them a goal. All right. But there's also something else that I'd almost laughed myself silly with this one. I will go to this one and I will share that tab.
Yeah, that one's up now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got this one up, yeah? Yes?
Yes.
Lady, I want you to appreciate. And I want you to appreciate too, right? Have envy for Almond because of his sexiness right now. This is, of course, an enhanced, falsified image. Right? I just want you to know that. It's an eidolon, right? It's an eidolon, but you may use that eidolon. Okay?
What is he talking about? No idea. Oh, dear. What a laugh.
The only thing that I don't really So aside from having, like, we have a friend named Lord Cameron, for example, and he has sort of his spoof, his own take on sort of a monster movie themed kind of priest, and he does organ playing. It's kind of a, guys that like monster movies and stuff like. So it's kind of that kind of vibe that he sort of played off of Babylon. But I think oh my God, I just lost what I was going to say. My gosh. What was I saying? Lord Cameron. Oh, if it wasn't for the
trying to get into his character, I think.
The theater, right? So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Lord Cameron, we know he gets into character. He gets the Bible and he gets all worked up, kind of like how people, like, I'm not a traditional Christian, but I've always sort of criticized the guys on the street corner when kids are out drinking. You're going to hell, and throwing the book in your face and stuff. He kind of does that same thing. And I can forgive and accept all of that and be entertained. The only thing I didn't love is, I just saw the AI images, was the concept that, like, my daughter's the same age as Chewie, or maybe a year younger or two.
Chewie's just turned 18, just had her 18th birthday end of July.
And this whole time, I would probably, I wouldn't ever ask my daughter to make some of the AI images that she's making or he's making, and they're pretending it's her and everyone's just assuming it's her, or he's just saying it is to mislead, and he's not doing anything that would involve her until just co-hosting as a way to sort of play the prank on us, because some of the pictures are so risky that that's kind of where I kind of stopped watching it, even for the theater, because I was like, not only did he slander me and throw my stuff up, put makeup on my face, and for having Gnostic Informant just come on the show, a guy I looked up to who has a YouTube channel, that made me find him. So I was like, some of these pictures, these underage individuals, there's not only do we know what the references are, but they're obviously references to sexual activity. They're not always, you don't see anything, but, like, just as an example, I don't even want to describe it. You have a 7-year-old, I'm assuming this is John in his mind, in his world, 7-year-old kid with purple stuff on the end of his tongue. That's where I was kind of like, I don't know how the hell my daughter could make that without me describing something pornographic to her to type in to create that AI image. And the way he talks about the material with her right off camera, that's where I didn't know if I was comfortable with watching the lessons anymore.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
And so that I kind of have a hard time with that. Now, I had hit him up and asked him if he ever wanted to come on. Obviously, there was no response, and I'm blocked in the comments, all for having Gnostic Informant on and maybe saying what I just said in a previous episode.
Yeah.
But that was in that whole, on your list, you had the narrative driving or canceling people, silencing them. I forgot how you worded it, but
I asked Snappy in an interview. So I've only ever done one interview with Snappy on Mandy's about his book. And I asked him directly, I said, well, why is Witch Doctor, why is he blocked on there? And he said that it had to do with your comments about the music, the Teddy Bass stuff.
Yeah.
But not to get into that particular, it was just there's a history of people, like, this is very culty stuff, right? The church, it's no different than the church. So the guy with the with the microphone on the corner talking about Jesus is no different, really, in my view. And I've been, I guess you could say, blessed that I didn't grow up as a Christian. I'm from a Native American background, and I was raised in that. Funerals at a longhouse, all this other stuff, powwows, all this other stuff. Learning the language, singing on drum groups, going through, seeing peyote rituals when I was 8, dance circles and things like that. So I'm from this outside perspective. But when I look in on this, I see no different than the atheist and the Christian, because they're out there on the corner yelling and screaming about what they want to believe. And it just gets back to the myth. And I think a lot of those myths are actually pretty correct, because we see them cross-culturally from Angkor Wat in Cambodia to Mesoamerica with the Zapotecs, where they have their labyrinth mythos, to King Minos in Greece with their labyrinth, right, with the Minotaur. So, but all that represents is that if you're just trying to come out here and have this endpoint teleology and ontology of explaining what happens in the universe, what you find is that you just end up in the middle and you're back at you still have to get yourself out. And it's just this repeating cycle, the Ouroboros that Marcel brings up, the same thing, right? That there's really, in my mind, there's no answer. And that's what we teach. We have our own mythos, but it's not like we cram it down people's throats. And we always leave an open window for things.
Yeah.
And that's where these guys get derailed, because to me, they're no different than a Christian as a cult. They're just telling you, this is right, this is correct, everybody else is wrong. He's a scholar, he's been doing it for this long.
Absolutely.
And everybody else gets it wrong except for him. But you know what? I look at the bigger picture of like, let's look and see what all of the cultures were doing. And there's a lot of similarities. And it's not, I'll look at some of the drug stuff that he brings up, Allie, and I was let down because when I first got in, people asked me, like, why do you watch it? What are you trying to get from it? When I first started watching it and getting into it, I thought, coming from his background, that he was going to track the entheogens and track, like with Ruck, right? Ruck actually tried to create the icon and failed, right? So I thought he was going to do that, but he never did. And I honestly, in my own opinion, in my own experiences, think that he would benefit, and much of his followers would probably benefit from an actual experience. They don't come off as people that have had many experiences other than what they're doing now with the tarot cards and things of that nature, which I don't care if people do that. It's not my rap. I don't believe in that stuff, but if they want to do it, do it. So my thing is coming from that angle is that I really don't see any difference between them in a lot of this. I see that there's a lot of things that they say that goes against the scholarly work that's actually out there on the entheogens, Marcel Liad, a lot of these guys that early on started doing things that you were getting into, near-death experiences and things of that nature. I also wanted to make a point because you brought it up. Like, it's like when you're a kid, if you watch a movie and then you like the movie a lot, maybe you watch it a couple times, and then you have a dream that you're in that same movie. That's how I think a lot of these, Christians that say they dream about Jesus or Michael coming down and visiting them in their room. That's how I envision that. And I think I've had a lot of those as a kid watching movies, thinking I was in Goosebumps or whatever movie I was getting into. And so I kind of equate, I'm not saying they're not real, because I side with Strassman and others and the Imperial College of London, where they're doing the near-death linking with the DMT and the dream state and things of that nature. We know the pineal gland will release DMT while you sleep, right? That's where the visions and things come from. And I think that if you have that in your head, it's kind of in the air, as I call it, things that are culturally. So you have a minor, small trip about things that are culturally happening. So I think that a lot of that comes from. And it's not to disprove them or say they're wrong. It's just, I think there's an explanation for it. Yeah, and so when these people, sit there and say they're doing this with Amen and they're having these visions of him, I mean, how is that? How are you not a New Age profiteer? Because that's really what you're doing. You're claiming to be basically another Jesus. It's no different than that DMT guy that says he sees the laser and he thinks everything's a simulation. You're just creating an ontology and a way to explain that ontology through an epistemology called justification, truth, belief, which is obviously stems from all angles. And this whole rap too, and I'm not here to offend anybody with this, don't take it the wrong way, but I have my own thinking on Aristotelian logic and reason, because he also brings that up all the time. Say that that's the best thing since sliced bread, but it's not, because Aristotelian logic went to induction and deduction and is both used by the atheist and the Christian to defend their narrative. Why? They say from the narrative of divine command theory that God is, but that's Aristotelian logic. That's their reasoning, and they're using it in the same context. In my opinion, the better correspondence, kind of what we do in the native world, and where we got all our medicine in the native world, is we watched animal-plant interactions. We watched ecology. So if an animal was sick and went to a root and got a medicine, we would do the same thing. That's how we learn how to use medicine, from nature itself. So we're looking at a one-to-one correspondence with nature and interacting with nature and being a part of it, not trying to control it. That's the difference. They're focused on pathogenesis with a lot of the Galen stuff. Galen talks about the four humors. Diascordy is the same thing, but that's all how to treat these things. Native Americans were more so on not only pathogenesis, but salutogenesis with the psychedelics, and not creating, as Iliad demonstrated in his work, and Levi Strauss as well. I mean, these are huge, huge names, and I can't believe people are just like, whatever, screw those. I mean, they're huge, they're so big, and people just ignore them because they want to follow Amen, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous to just say that these guys don't know what they're talking about when their entire career was focused on studying the liminality. And even in that conversation I had with Snappy when I brought up liminality, he thought I meant liminal space. Okay, these guys don't know the terminology, yet they want to have an opinion like they know the terminology. Okay, it's just completely in left field. People that, and I look at the archaeological record, right? I also have a minor in geophysics, where a lot of the archaeological things that we're finding comes from the geophysics, and I actually did that professionally for the U.S. government, where I had a clearance and all that stuff, and I did it also in a small company in Florida looking for sinkholes prior to that.
Mhm.
So I have this experience, and I'm looking at this stuff. I'm looking at how cool these myths and cultures were, but they were just cults. I don't follow that, right? And I try to empower others to really get back to their own sense of intuition and instinct and live their lives to the best of their knowledge. But where I depart from their group, not only in just the everyday culty stuff, is that I believe, it's my own opinion, and people can get mad at me if they want, but looking at this, I believe that they're all empath. An empath is somebody that's trying to save others, right? So a Christian that says, I was hurt by the church, I was lied to, I'm mad, or it could have been academia, whatever it is in his case. Now they go and they try to save other people from that same interaction.
Yeah.
That is an empathic behavior, because what you're doing is you're taking all of your time and energy to try to save other people rather than discovering yourself and who you are. Jung talks about it. He calls that an empath getting to the moment where they can say, no, I'm not going to waste all my time and energy trying to save other people. I'm going to focus on myself. He calls that the moment of individuation. That was his terminology for it.
Mm-hmm.
But the empath is somebody that I think the Christian world, and Chase brings this up all the time, it's the Western mind frame, Christian mind frame particularly, that they turn you into this empathic behavior of feeling guilty for yourself. And then if you turn like Gnostic in Myth Vision away from Christianity and make all these videos to say, well, they were probably wrong here, 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 they're really trying to reach a wider audience in that overall push to try to bring them out of something that they believe hurt them or wronged them.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. It's not to make fun of. I don't make fun of empaths. Trust me, I don't. I think that at some point we're all probably empathic in our lives, right? It's not to make fun of them. It's just to say that this is what's going on. And some of them, like you, can have the vision to say, well, I'm going to ask questions because this doesn't line up with things, and I'm going to do it in a respectful manner. Again, I don't know how people can attack you. And I guess I can. It's some people that just want to point fingers away from themselves, right? So they just look for others to attack and maybe make themselves useful in that empathic journey that they're on to try to help others. But now they're trying to help others away from Allie. Now they're probably going to attack me and say, well, show his face and put lipstick on it. And I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for an audience. I'm not looking for anything. I'm completely comfortable in my being. And I don't need, people to agree with me or not. I'm just looking at the literature and the actual artifacts that are physical that you can hold. And many of these guys, if you look at the best works, in my opinion, of a guy like not Myth Vision, but Gnostic Informant, in my opinion, the best guest he's ever had on was an archaeologist, Dr. Adler. And Dr. Adler is the reason why Gnostic says he thinks that this is all Hellenistic in the first place. Why? Because he actually has physical, hard evidence.
Yeah.
Not just words, not just
Gad Barnea did
evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had Gad Barnea on yesterday, 2 days ago.
All right.
Yeah. It just came out yesterday. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I need to catch up on that one. Yeah.
Anyway, anything on the presentation?
Yeah, I had more. The time's going on. I'm going to skip some.
Yeah, we'll have you on again too.
We can always save some for another day or something if we're running out of time here.
Yeah, let's touch another topic, and then we'll set up for a part 2 where we do the part 3 of the quest for the burning purple, and we can really break that open because
Right.
that's the final thing, so I can finish that chapter. And I was going to put you in the book as part of the research.
Yeah,
if that's okay with you, obviously.
Yeah. I've got plenty to say about the burning purple, but I also know that Stephen has, and he's already said a lot of it on. Well, his big one with Derek back in January.
Yeah.
But I'm also privy to information that Stephen has compiled for Dr. Ruck. And a lot of that also includes the burning purple and Dr. Ruck's opinion of, he's kept it anonymous, but this other scholar and what he has said, and really how he can't see how that ties together. But Neil announced last Saturday that he is now going to actually get his act together and put this video together. So he's going to release the Carl Ruck rebuttals fairly soon, I hope. And the burning purple is included in that. There's also something else on the cards. I won't name him yet, but it's not true that Owen, with his claim, is saying that all the scholars are running from him. They're not. I've offered to debate, but also others have. And one of these scholars has then gone to Stephen and said, all right, well, I'm going to write an article instead. So he's going to write a very substantial article analysing the foundation of this Medea's mystery, which he's written up in 2 articles. Now, one in particular is, I can't remember how it's called, but it's in chapter 26 of the Toxicology in Antiquity. And it goes into the burning purple, it goes into supposedly her taking drugs from her vagina and all the very bare basics from which he then has created this drug production mystery, which he then is alleging that Jesus was doing the corruption of it. So we're looking at the very foundation, the Medea mystery. And, you know, I've been working with Stephen. We've already torn it apart anyway, but this other scholar is going to write it up and put it in his blog too. So there's going to be yet another substantial pushback there. So that is to come, which will be great. But, you know, I can say what I know about the burning purple, which really is not going to be that much different to what Stephen and Gnostic has already been saying. But I might be able to tie it together in a way that just comes over differently, perhaps. I don't know, but I'm very willing to talk about it. And it is a myth. There is no burning purple.
We haven't found any direct text.
No, there isn't. It's his own invention. And you know, and I've got clips of him explaining it differently in different places and where it's used in different places. It's part of his whole myth that he's created.
Yeah, even the drugs that he brings up, like he brought up basically datura, which is scopolamine, mixed with opium. So you're taking an upper with a delirium. I mean, I'm bringing the heavyweights in. Timothy Leary, Dennis and Terrence McKenna. Yeah. They did not like deliriums, and they told you why, because you forget and you do a lot of weird things. If you read the trip reports of people doing datura in the U.S.,
it's wild.
Why do you think it's illegal? Because people were running down the street naked. People were showing up in the ERs doing crazy stuff, trying to climb walls. So I get it. Back in the shamanistic periods, that was probably revered. You had shamans probably like, oh, great, you know, that was awesome. But today you can't do that stuff. No. So him having this other idea that their drugs and compounds were so advanced and all this, no, they were not. I'm telling you today, people today, the designer drugs are a lot more intricate to where they're doing this allosteric modulation with even just mushrooms by cultivating new species that don't even exist.
Yep. I've done some.
Never existed back then. And so people that are taking that purview too are just lost. Marcel and I spent a lot of time actually looking at the Theriac recipes. Yes, they have DMT. Yes, they have MAOI inhibitors in them. So, and a lot of other things, stimulants, uppers, downers, all sorts of things. But in my opinion, based off of my own thing, where I'm all about the indole alkaloids, tryptamines, which are, LSD, LSA, DMT, ayahuasca, psilocybin, those things, that delirium, nothing similar. And a lot of the people, the heavyweights that are in the psychedelic community, stay clear of the scopolamine because it was a clear delirium. So we could even have, and like I brought up, well, people say, well, who's doing all that cool stuff? Well, I brought one up in South Africa. They found a tribe that was literally had their shamans mixing, I think they call it Bufon. Bufon is a psychoactive plant down there, and they would mix it with psilocybe milwati, so another psilocybin mushroom, and they'd mix it together. And guess what they also did with it? They used it for poison, for hunting. So when he brings up the poison darts, and we were the ones doing this, and they were doing that. No, they were not the only ones doing this. And if you want to go toe to toe, Amin, and talk about who had the better psychedelics, and there's a huge backing with not only people on blue light, but also shroomery that's been around for a long time. I'll go to toe with you all day long about that. They also would set up patients. So it wasn't regulated just for a high class, like Ilya talks about with the Eleusinian mysteries. 1,000 to 2,000, Ruck talked about this. Well, not everybody was invited to the Eleusinian mysteries, right? So it was designated for just certain classes of people. Down there in the tribes, they would allow patients for real psychosomatic ailments, and they would put them in front of a reflective surface so that they could see them going through the journeys, and the healers and shamans would give that reading back to them to try to help them through their suffering or their pains that they were going through. So they really used it from this genetic standpoint, but you're not going to hear that in any of his chats, right? Because it's all theater. It's all to get these guys into this cult. And if they don't think they're in a cult, trust me, it's a cult. Do I still like some of the stuff that he says? Yes. Why? Because some of it's very important. Here's one example. The porneia is actually it's in Revelation 18. It's there. But also they have where he brings up the point about the Nicolaitans and the Barbarites doing this ritual that you brought up earlier with the semen sacrifice and offering it up and, consuming it. That's really important because if you look up the church fathers, what they say of the Nicolaitans, they actually say that they were doing that. Mm-hmm. And they also say that Nicholas, which was one of the first of the 7 deacons, he was one of them. So this started early on with that whole different groups going their own way, doing this in the Gnostic groups. Well, that's one thing I like that he brings up, but I agree with you. There's a lot of things that I have questions on and things that I don't like where he's just trying to, it's like he's trying to ignore history or trying to create his own version of history.
Yeah. All right. I will just throw in a caution about their assumption about Deacon Nicholas. There's actually probably better proof that it's an Aramaic word, Nicola, which means let's eat. And it regarded how they would, once they'd done their little secret greeting, they realized, oh yeah, you're one of us. And then it was let's eat, Nicola. And they would set out a feast. So anyway, that's irrelevant. And I quite agree with you. The thing that becomes abusive is when you make your way exclusive. And therefore, it just immediately means everybody else is wrong. We don't want to listen to what you're saying, you're wrong. And that's the killer. I think nobody should have the arrogance to say, I've got the right way. Nobody has the right way. We should all be humble enough to realize other people have their own experiences. They have their own opinions. There is no ultimate truth that only one group can find. The universe is bigger than that. And let's share it together. Don't compete. Let's contribute. Let's help each other. So, yeah.
Well said.
All right. So I think we've been going on long enough. I hadn't got on to the sincerely mistaken part, because that was where I was going to touch on his own drug use, which is the effect of marijuana on him. I have, I don't know whether, maybe keep that for another time, but it's fascinating. An exchange by email from him to another lady after he'd had the same amount of marijuana as she'd had. And he had amazingly weird hallucinations, which he then shared with her. And I've got it all there in email. Weird things. And he says also in his deposition, I haven't even talked about the fact that he is definitely a liar in the way he has presented the reason for his dismissal. I haven't talked about any of that yet. I've already talked about that with with Zach Miller in his other show. Maybe that's a useful one to refer to, because I've gone through a lot more detail on other things in that video as well. But it seems like his mind is very susceptible to seeing connections because of his maybe previous use of some harder drugs. It's just a speculation. I have heard through other people that there have been experiences in the past that he's had. But, I have nothing to substantiate, so I'm not going to repeat them. But without doubt, he does have a very strong reaction to cannabis, and he uses it regularly as his sacramental drug. So what is in his head? How is he seeing things? Is he seeing straight when he's reading these texts? Is he seeing connections? Is his mind just jumping, right, that belongs to that one, let's connect it. I'm not inside his head. I can only look from the outside and think he is seeing things and believing that he's seeing things, but he's mistaken. And I think amongst the foundation of what he's put together, he's sincerely seen things from incorrectly and believed they were right, and then built on them. So, I'm not saying he's an out-and-out liar. I'm not saying he's an out-and-out deceiver. But the way he's presenting everything, he should have the honesty to say, this is my theory, rather than this is the reality. It's not the reality.
Yeah, he says he's just reading the text.
Yeah, but
he goes, I don't have a theory or opinion. I'm just reading
the text. No. He is not reading them. He's interpreting them and adding in his own spin on it all.
If you can't tell he's interpreting, you're not watching or listening very well.
And how he'll prime the audience and lead them by putting all this ideas in their heads before he then gets to the text. So when he gets to the text, he can.
It's very much like an evangelical preacher. I grew up in a Christian environment too, and it's just like watching. It's like we had a youth group, but then we would also have this province-wide thing called YC, where all the youth groups across all of Canada would not all of Canada, but all of Newfoundland would meet up, and it would be all the denominations, and it would be like 3,000 of us for the whole weekend, and they would bring in preachers and bands from all over the world, and the evangelical style of preaching is very powerful. It's the speaking with authority, just kind of.
He has his own little deacons.
Yeah.
All these guys that are just at the echo chamber are his little deacons.
Yep. Well, he certainly has a few enablers who will. I will talk about it, because this is a rumor that's gone round about me and my supposed group of haters that I'm leading, and I'm supposed to have sent them to basically spam other people's channels like Snappies, and I've supposedly got them to say all nasty anti-trans things. And Snappy has said this on 3 occasions. Now, I'm actually thinking Snappy is not inventing this. And there was also a very sudden turnaround, because Snappy used to be friends with Ariel, and suddenly Ariel had this keep away from me, I don't want you and your me, Rat, Graham and Ariel named the four of us. He said, I don't want you anywhere near my channel, keep away. And I thought, hey, what? Ariel was completely blown away by that. But then I've heard 3 times on other occasions, I've got them written actually, where he really does believe that I'd sent a gang to say some awful things in his chat about anti-trans. And I thought, I've got a daughter who's agender, and I'm absolutely nothing against the trans. What's this about?
Snappy's
dealing with that on our
trans
channel.
community as a scapegoat.
They're doing it to me now. They're doing it to everybody.
Chase, for crying out loud, has a trans employee, like
Yeah, it makes no sense. They want to use the social justice warrior mentality as a way to shut you out, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know if I worded that correctly, but yeah,
it works.
I just can't make it out. I can't make up whether this is a complete invention that Snappy has created just to be nasty to me, or whether another party sent people to make all this horrible stuff and leaked that it was from me. So Snappy truly believes that I had sent these people.
Maybe one comment could have been made, but Snappy's just making a mountain out of a molehill. I think Snappy's unimaginably egotistical and can't understand it. I think Snappy's also a bit of a narcissist. Very, very fucking much so.
He's got to be the king of this world. And,
yeah.
He plays nice in the camera, and I mean, I'll say it to him if he wants to come on and have it out.
Yeah.
But
he's two-faced. Very, very
one
much.
version here with the cards and everything, and then behind the scenes, it's a completely different person.
Oh yeah, the messages he sent me are quite nasty.
Mm-hmm.
They're just drama bound.
This
is what you have when you have so him and a lot of his crew, the Snappy crew, and I'm not making fun of them, right? For this, they're aspiring YouTubes, right? So a lot of them are trying to make money, monetize, and things of that nature, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because you have mods that are on his show, but he makes fun of people and calls them for trying to make money on YouTube, but they're doing that. Okay, fine, do your thing, right? But with that, they're trying to kind of drum up this drama stuff. And we all know that they talk privately behind doors because we saw it the other day when they came and rushed Marcel. The same rushing that you experienced, they came and rushed Marcel in the chat. I wasn't there for the Marcel stuff. I'm not getting into particulars.
Yeah, it's fine. It's been almost a year now of this stuff. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, so...
All right, I'll read. I've picked up some of these things that Snappy has said in response to the release of my Jason Horsley interview. He reached out to Chris Bennett. Now I'm good friends with Chris Bennett.
Me too.
Yeah.
So I can't say good, but
yeah. Well, cannabis advocate. Now, Snappy said, "Hey Chris, I wanted to reach out to you. This is Snappy. I interviewed you with Wretch a while back about 420 on my channel, Drawing Down Stars. If you remember, I'm a student of Ammon Hillman. I'd love to provide perspective on all this. I reject any cult associations. Well, that's not true. Snappy started the Ordo Serpentis Rosae. He had the cult with its initiations in his own server. So anyway, that's not true. And will dispute Ali Rowan and her perspective." That's fair enough. You've got a chance to, but okay. "She has been harassing and stalking, sending people to send hate, anti-trans hate, me because of my associations with Ammon. I had to block her from all my platforms and her mob that she has riled up. I reject all cult associations," he said that again, "and I hope you're willing to see multiple sides on this, give voice to others. Ali is a bully. Snappy." So that's very charming. And And do you remember, Marcel, when you were querying who's Ali? Snappy chimes up. She's a serial harasser, stalker, and liar who
Yes.
who's brigade multiple channels. She's obsessed with Ammon and his community and is making most of her stuff up.
The first thing I was like, it's like, this woman isn't even here to defend herself. Like,
Yeah.
why are you guys all like that right there? Like, as soon as I read that, I was like, man, like, you guys are
What-
shitting all over someone who's not
That
even
answers your question, though. Why are they doing that when she's not there to defend herself? It's very clear.
here.
They feel powerful when they do that. That's the whole stick, and that
Yeah.
gets back to the psychological stuff. But you know, I'm not here to make fun of Snappy, but I hope if he does see this,
He
that
will.
he just takes time to not attack Allie for this, but to just reconsider his position. That's all. I'm not here to attack you, Snappy. Just look at what's going on, maybe understand a little bit more. And I don't know all the dramas. I'm not saying, you have your side, she has her side, whatever. But I'm not here to do that. But there's no place for drama here, and people can talk openly. That's why I like WatchStar. He's got everybody from every side on his channel. Some people take it the wrong way, whatever, but he brings all people on to discuss.
Yeah.
And that's why I like Allie too, is because she's open. She's not here to criticize, and I've never seen any of that from her.
No, and I wouldn't. But what I am hoping to do is just wave a flag. Now,
Yes.
I know that the people that are already fully in are just not even going to listen and find excuses, not to take my word seriously, because they've already been fed this mountain of slander against me that, I'm some monster that's
Under the bed, yeah.
whatever. All right. But what I am more concerned about is that if there are people still on the fringes, not really sure about committing,
Yes.
I'd like just to be a warning voice to say, look, it's a bit of a toxic group. You're going to get deceived. You're going to get drawn into sort of a hyper-focused fanaticism almost.
I'm trying to make me happy.
It's not healthy.
Not at all.
Just keep clear of it.
I think we're approaching a great time to put a pin in the conversation and continue it another time, maybe.
Yeah, we've been going for a long time.
This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I am hungry now. That's for sure. I was playing.
Yeah, but that gives us a good segue to have the next one be about it's almost a good way to make it another chapter, because that gives the next one to be more about the drugs and stuff, like you were saying.
The next time that we convene, guys, for those watching, I will have my expected son, more than likely. We do a longer type thing. I might do a couple of lives Monday or Tuesday, but he's coming. So really looking forward to that. I'm going to put up some different stuff. I have a few videos on just like kind of my personal life, just to give people some insight into what a day in the life of mine might be like. And you can see sort of a little bit of my world. And yesterday I posted a video of training 2 guys for a show. One of them is he was a guest with J-Frog not too long ago. So I really thought that was cool to just show people that in my farm and my animals and stuff.
Wait. You mean you don't spend 3 hours attacking people on the chats?
Well, and my final thing as we sign off, and then I'll go and clean this up and stuff, but is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people in my age range and the younger and even the older age ranges, one of the biggest things that got us here was we were interested in either the truth, maybe an alternate theory, maybe the entheogens. And what's so ironic about what we've had to deal with is that all of the people that want to be the head honcho of their groups and all of the people that follow them and stuff, it seems like this toxic behavior that we were just talking about has crept into even our shows so much to the point where I ask myself, if everybody here is these, ergot eating, mushroom eating, wannabe shamans and stuff, that's at least how I come across. You've lost the whole message of those entheogens anyway. It's supposed to melt the ego. to accept everybody, to spread love and stuff. And if you're a Christian watching this, just as a joke, maybe God did send his son as an incarnation to come and just remind you of that. If you really want that to be what was in those texts and what that secret might be, you can, you can absorb all this knowledge and information. You can not attack people along the way. I've had my comic jabs and stuff with Gnostic QAnon, and things like that. But I just want everybody to think about that. Now, there's going to probably be there's a little ripple in the world, and it'll iron out like it always does. But I'll be looking forward to the part 2 of this with our guest, Ali Rowan. And we're going to not only dig into the quest for the burning purple, but we want to hear more about these semen sacraments. So,
Okay.
Awesome. So, all right, guys, I appreciate it so much. Catch you next time.
Goodbye, everybody, and thank you.